Hello there and welcome to EPTV. Forgive the slightly strange angle here, but I'm using my handheld device this time to present an EPTV special on syndicate ownership of racehorses. We hope you've been enjoying all the content we've been providing here on EPTV throughout the whole of the equestrian world over the past few weeks during lockdown. It's been our pleasure to bring it to you. And we're broadcasting live now on YouTube and also on Facebook too. A syndicate special then, as racing looks forward to resuming after several weeks in lockdown. Sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be out there racing again behind closed doors, I'm sure. It might be an opportunity, perhaps, as we look to the future, to attract more people to the sport, to share the costs of owning a racehorse in the form of a partnership or syndicate. And two men that know all about that join me on the programme today. Sam Hoskins of Kennet Valley Thoroughbreds and Hot to Trot Racing. Welcome to you, Sam. And Tom Castle of White Diamond Racing operates a successful syndicate at the more affordable level, perhaps. Welcome to you both, gents.
Hi, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Nice to see you guys. First of all, I'm going to ask you individually, Tom, your picture's on the big screen at the moment. How have you been finding how's been treating you?
Sorry, say that again, Mike. You just cut out slightly there.
Sorry, Tom. Yeah, how has lockdown been treating you?
A lot of racing replays, Mike. A lot of racing replays. I've literally been going over a lot of old races that my horses were involved in. Different sort of fixtures that we've targeted over the years, and how we could improve where we run our horses run. I think during this time, actually, has given us plenty of time to actually look back and analyse the syndicate that I run, and where we could improve. How we can improve the experience for owners, how we can improve sort of our relationship with our trainer and the content that we send out as well.
And how have you found your members been in the last few weeks, Tom? They've been slightly restless. What has the feedback been to you?
I've been quite fortunate that so far, I think the first thing to mention, I haven't lost any members, which initially was a worry. Potentially down the line, once this might affect people, we might see sort of this happen further down the line rather than the initial knee-jerk reaction of someone just wanting to leave the syndicate. I've sort of managed over the years to sort of build a rapport with my members, and I'd like to say that I've got a lot of trust with a lot of them. So I've been quite fortunate the monthly payments have still been being paid. I look forward to the future when racing does resume.
Sam, what about you? You've been at this syndicate game now for quite some time. How have your members been speaking to you, and what are their hopes or disappointments at the moment?
Hi, Mike. I think everything's been obviously very disappointing, but it's a lot of people have been keeping very positive, and I think perhaps the last sort of 10 days has probably been the bit of sort of negativity as such, a bit frustration perhaps creeping in, but in general everyone's been great. I think, as Tom alluded to, it's a great opportunity for us and indeed our trainers to enhance the communication, and the fact that we're doing something like this today is indicative of what we've been trying to do with the syndicates, and we've been conducting sort of Zoom interviews with trainers and putting on obviously lots of videos and photos and keeping them as up to date as possible and really trying to take that to a new level. And I think if there's something that good for syndicate ownership and indeed sort of racehorse ownership in general that's come out of this situation, is the improved communication that's had to happen. And there are a lot of trainers I think probably have felt that actually something's probably seemed very hard and they didn't have time for it in the past, but actually it's brought this on, and I think it's got to be a good thing. And I think our members have been very patient, but they've appreciated it, and then now at last there seems to be possibly a date that we could aim at, and suddenly we can maybe start thinking about racing going forwards.
Sam, you just frozen on me there. I don't know whether you can hear me okay still. Yeah, it's probably my broadband is not working too well. Yeah. So basically, you've seen that you've been adapting to the new regime, if you like, and people have been quite flexible.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. The trainers have been wonderful, and and members as well. And so we've been, like Tom, we've been lucky. Everyone's been very patient. They've stuck in it. I mean, we charge people sort of upfront for the season, so we've been lucky on that front. And I think really for the syndicate world, that the whole sort of fallout from this all will be seen in due course when we're starting to launch new syndicates and ask for next sort of top-up payments, etc., because that will really be indicative of how much this has hit people. But I mean, most people are in racehorse ownership for the love of it, and it is their disposable income they're using. As long as that hasn't been hit too much, hopefully the priority of having a horse and training is high up there in their agendas. And of course, in this time, whilst a lot of people have lost money in investments, etc., which is going to be so important for the ownership world, they of course haven't had time to spend money on going on lavish holidays overseas as well. So hopefully when things come back, people will be longing to get back onto a race course or initially just seeing their horses run, that it will spark just a incentive for people to get involved and take a share in a horse and just enjoy a bit of a thrill, because there haven't been many thrills recently.
Well, sorry, Sam. Yeah, let's hope so. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of people think, of course, that racing will lose owners, individual owners, as a result of COVID-19 and the subsequent sort of economic fallout. But there is opportunity there for syndicates. Do you feel, I'll throw this out to you now, Tom, but do you feel, or in fact, Michael in Cornwall has emailed us saying, do you think that racecourses should react to the growth in syndicates a little bit more positively, given that owners' facilities are overcrowded at many racecourses?
Well, I think you see with new syndicates that have formed over the last couple of years, probably the most famous one would be the Owners Group with Pentland Hills. The fact that they have hundreds and hundreds of owners, and the racetracks just basically can't accommodate it. I think there's a couple of issues. I would say that one, the owners' facilities at many tracks aren't good enough. I'd also say the size of the facilities aren't large enough for owners groups across the card. I don't want to name race courses because I'm not going to do that, but some of them are just too small. I think there could be a possible solution where race courses don't particularly take into effect, is that sometimes there may be a meeting where the restaurant may not be fully booked out for the sort of the general admission or the premier enclosure, and they could easily transform that into some sort of owner's facility. Because, you know, fortunately, some tracks will only offer 6 complimentary badges for owners. And for a syndicate like mine, and I'm sure Sam as well, you may have 12, 15 owners. And a lot of the time I'm sacrificing our lunches for extra badges. And I don't think that's right for the owner's experience.
Tom, you say you're not going to name and shame, but can you give us an example of a race course that gets it right?
That gets it right? I have to say that Cheltenham was very good. When we ran Cheltenham back 2 years ago, as you'd expect, the Premier track, they looked after us. I'd say that York were excellent as well. We actually had, when we had a 2-year-old, blessed to impress, we went to York one year, and they were fantastic as well. I just think that the overall experience, I feel like they almost need a chaperone for owners and trainers. They need someone that's going to guide them where to go and what to do. I feel that courses they give you your badge on the door, and that's it. Get on with your day. I don't feel there's any really specialised treatment. You might just queue up for your lunch. There's no one that comes around and checks that you're okay. I just feel it needs a bit more hospitality.
Yeah, I can understand that. Sam, you would agree on that, I guess. And what have your experiences been on that? Well,
it's there are a lot of race courses that go sort of out and beyond for us, which is absolutely fantastic. But I think for me, it's the disparity between them. Perhaps some of the smaller independent tracks don't really either get it or they don't have the facilities. And every race course is different, of course, in terms of size, and those who've got the spare boxes, etc. Some of them have been very innovative and have really grasped this and offered it out at sort of. And it helps their own facilities by putting sort of a syndicate in a box where the syndicate would sort of pay at cost for it, and that's a really good thing. And I think it's one thing I really want to see is a bit of work with the racecourses so they can understand why it's important to encourage and to put up with big crowds, because we never know where the next big owner's coming from, and someone like a John Dance of this world came through via a syndicate, and those kind of super owners, you don't know where people are coming from. And I think it's great to for racing's image, perhaps not just to be sort of associated with being reliant on major sort of billionaire owners. Actually having a few Davids in there to topple a few Goliaths is a good thing, and actually a group of mates wherever they come along, or a group of colleagues or whatever. It's a good story, and I think racing needs stories, and I think that's sort of that's what I feel.
Well, we've seen from how the Australians do it with their syndicates, and how many.
And Sam, can I ask you?
Sorry, it's gone a bit jumpy.
Yeah, Tom, it's communications aren't great, but you're right. It's been massively successful in Australia. And do you think, how can we get the message out there that this is the working man's sort of game, as well as being a sport for kings?
I think the real issue is what Sam touched on, is the actual communication with the racecourses individually. I think, as he said, some do understand and grasp that sometimes when there is spare space, a box will be offered out at a discounted price, which makes sense. It gives that sense of the social side of it, that everyone's in the box together. They don't need to charge full prices if they're not originally sold it out. I've had this, I think this has only happened to me since I started in 2011. This has only happened on one occasion where I've been offered a box at a discounted price, maybe because I am a smaller syndicate and not so well known. But that was actually Utoxeter, and it worked. It was really good for the day. We had a box and they provided it, and it was good fun. And I do feel like the camaraderie between our syndicate improved that day, because we were all together. We were all having a few little bets together. We all cheering the horse on in the box together. And it did work. And I think, as Sam said, this could definitely work with other courses. It's just if they're willing to go the extra mile, and some aren't.
Yeah, you mentioned the betting side of things there, Tom. Is that something that's important to your syndicates as well, Sam? Do your members tend to like a punt?
It's a good question. Yes, they do, but not in a. I think we have a lot of people who would like a bet, but not in a big way. I think people are always interested, but I wouldn't say we wouldn't call ourselves betting syndicates. And I know we have sometimes people have contacted us in the past, say they like a punt, and that's the reason they're in there. And I'm very, very cautious not to encourage that, as our horses aren't campaigned in that way. But we all like a little dabble, and and of course that is a benefit of racehorse ownership. You do get to hear when your horse is sort of going well at home, but it isn't a science, and but it's interesting. It's part of the game, and of course betting funds the sport largely. So it's always interesting to keep your ears open, and we're all too biased towards our own horses, no doubt. I always said to myself that I would be very frustrated the day that we had a syndicate winner at sort of 33-1 and I hadn't had a penny on it. And we had a couple of years ago, we had a nice 2-year-old called Flashcard that ran in quite a hot maiden down at Salisbury. And I knew he went quite well, but this race, there was a horse in there rated 90. So he probably had to run in a mark of 90 to win on debut, and trained by Andrew Balding, who isn't really regarded for winning on debut, especially. And he went off 33-1 and I didn't have a penny on, and he won. And anyway, all absolutely over the moon, but you never quite know.
Yeah, that would be a missed opportunity. That would get on us for sure. But Tom, you've been running your syndicate now, White Diamond, for almost a decade. How did you get interested? How was your interest in the sport sparked?
Well, I'll start originally. My granddad was an illegal bookmaker during the war, and my dad was a bookmaker as well. He had a bookmakers in Dagenham, so I was sort of born into the betting side of the game. But from a very little boy, I always wanted to own a racehorse, and at the time I didn't think it was plausible. And so I just sort of, as Twitter was starting back in sort of 2010, 2011, I sort of jumped onto a syndicate that was offering shares. It just so turned out that the guy who was running the syndicate actually turned out to be a con man, and he'd taken a lot of money from the owners, and he'd stolen, obviously not paying the trainer, and it was an absolute mess. And it was a really bad first time experience for me. I obviously lost money out of it. I somehow got wrapped up where a lot of the owners thought that I was actually involved in sort of the con, but I had nothing to do with it at all. I was just a new member who was very enthusiastic, who wanted to go to the sales with the main guy because I wanted to learn. I was lucky enough, I managed to clear my name, and I decided to start my own syndicate just to prove that, you know, I can do this. It wasn't easy. There's a lot of forms to fill out with Weatherby's and sort of there's a hell of a lot to start up. I'm sure they've improved it since then. But really, you know, we had our first horse we bought for £400 with Sheena West, called Chilworth Lass off the flat. And, you know, she got second once at Plumpton, but it was a real wake up when you first went into ownership of how hard it really is and how much you learn throughout the years and how much I'm still learning now, you know, as I say, a decade later. And there's just not enough information that you can gather. There's not enough breeding that you can know. And I do tend to go out and buy my own horses, or at least work with the trainer that I'm with to buy the horse. I put a lot of time and effort watching the racing replays, as I'm sure Sam does as well when buying a horse. You know, you've got to have a budget. It's very important to have a budget. You can't overstretch yourself. If you do, you know, you put yourself in trouble potentially. So there's a lot of things to factor in when you're buying a horse, running a syndicate, keeping your members happy. The whole racecourse experience, the whole day, you're almost like a host for the day. And it's very important that you can interact with everybody.
Yeah, very good point. And we've touched on another issue there as well. A challenge for the syndicates is to get the trust, isn't it? And Sam, I'm going to put this one to you. Terry in Devon says, how do sole owners view syndicates? Do you ever feel there's a them and us sort of one-upmanship perhaps towards syndicates, or do you find that when you're down at the yard that everybody's treated the same?
Yeah, I do. I do feel a bit of an inferiority complex that some could look down. And I remember a couple of years ago getting a bit frustrated because there was quite a bit going on about the paddock at the time. And there were quite a few people saying, oh, it's always the syndicates are causing the problems with piling people into the paddock. But then I remember going you go racing sort of a month later and you go and see the sort of 2,000 guineas or something in Newmarket, which would have probably no syndicates in, or did at the time have no syndicates in. And the paddock was never been busier, full of their major owners and their entourages. And I remember thinking, oh, that's a bit annoying. But I do think they are a bit looked after. And I do feel sorry for a bit for the sole owners in a way, because there is issues on the owners' sort of rooms and stuff at the racecourses, and it tends to. And I could see how a sole owner feels that perhaps syndicates could bulk it out. So I do want to try and see it from that side. But I think if you were a sole owner and a other half or whatever, and you're going racing, I'd hope that the racecourse should be offered. That's the time when the racecourse should be taking you in. If there's just two of you into the racecourse dining room, saying, look, why don't you go and have your lunch in the restaurant? And so it is a bit more tiered. Yes. And so maybe and if you're a syndicate, if Tom or I take sort of 15, 20 people along, well, we can't really realistically expect to go into a restaurant, but hopefully there's a good place, which is a syndicate owners sort of area where we can perhaps sit down and we can all have a drink together. And maybe if there's some food, great, but if there's not, then we realize we're taking quite a lot of people, so that's okay. But I think it's important for us to treasure the sole owners, but realize at the same time that syndicate ownership is a starting point for so many to get into sole ownership. And if they just stay in syndicates, that's great, but because some people might say, I'd prefer to have a 10 horses rather than a hole in one. And actually, given the way that prize money is in this country, that's probably not a stupid thing to do. And all I would say is I think word of mouth is the big thing about how we can get more people into not only our syndicates, but into racing as a whole, because it's amazing. We've been so lucky. We've never had any money really to spend on marketing. And it's always try to be word of mouth and try to give people a good time and a good experience. And going back to what Tom said about trust, so important to get people to trust you and if we can buy or lease good horses and make it fun, then hopefully the rest will follow.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And Tom, you concur with that, of course. And Tom, how would you go about finding your next members? Would it be word of mouth, or is there any way you can advertise? What's your modus operandi with that?
We first started actually where all our members originally come through Twitter. We would just run a competition. We actually started with like a name the racehorse competition, and it got people involved. We got a lot of likes and retweets, and we sort of build up a bit of a following on Twitter. That's really where we began. Now a lot of it is word of mouth. Your a lot of friends that are involved will say, "Oh, my mate wants to get involved," or so you sort of know someone through somebody, which helps a lot. Again, going back to what Sam said with the trust, it is so important for us syndicates, because at the end of the day, someone can literally stop their monthly payments and walk away. And our contracts aren't really legally binding. We haven't really got a foot to stand on. It's something that probably does need to be looked at, because in the past I had people just disappear on me. And it's very frustrating because you're then short on the money for the training fees. So you have to cover it some way. And it's not an easy situation to be in, and it's something that you don't want to put yourself in. So being able to trust somebody when they join your syndicate as a member is so important. And I think that we do need more steps in place to protect our syndicates, because at the moment there isn't.
Yeah, well said, well said. And I mean, we could go on for a long time today, gents, but obviously time is going to beat us a little bit here. But before I let you two get back to work, inverted commas, I'd like to ask both of you, what do you think racing could do to attract more people to the sport in a nutshell, do you think, Sam?
I think getting people into ownership, or getting people sort of going racing, or both. We've just cut out slightly, so I'll try and answer both. I think getting involved with ownership, I think, as I said, word of mouth is so important. To give those people a good experience about whatever stake they have in a horse, to give them a good experience, and that is the most important, to make it fun. The aspirational value of owning a racehorse, standing in a paddock, or with your jockey and your trainer, however slow your horse may be, whether you're at Brighton or Ascot, is second to none. And standing in the winners' enclosure, whether you're fourth at Brighton or you're winning at Ascot, again, it's a great feeling. I think that's so important. About getting more people into the sport, I think we need to engage with a younger audience. I think it's quite easy for racecourse to sell racing as a place to go and go and get drunk with your friends, which obviously it's great. It's a good fun thing to do, but we've got to be important to try to get across the message of the fact that the complexities of racing and what fun it can be to try and engage with the racing, and going to look at the horses in the paddock and studying the form and having a bet, because it's a very complex way. It's not like going into a casino and putting it on red or black. You've got so many different areas how you can try and work out your winner. And I don't see a bad thing in trying to, whether you're actually betting on the horses or whether you're just trying to pick a selection. There's so many complexities in it, and you'll see the excitement of, I always find when I'm going racing and suddenly it's good ground at the start of the day and it's pouring throughout the rain, it's the excitement of trying to change all your plans around and suddenly realizing you fancy all the soft ground horses. That kind of thing is like nothing else really. And I suppose it could only be compared to sort of a conference side playing a Premiership side on a wet pitch and on a non-league ground. But it's there's so many different assets that are so interesting about racing. I think we need to sort of promote the sport as what it is, horses racing against each other, and not just promoting and not just taking easy money by saying, look, just go and it's just a glorified bar in the middle of the countryside to go and get drunk.
Yeah, I think one of the fascinating things about racing for me, guys, is the amount of the spectrum of personality that you can meet in the game. It's a great sort of area to meet people in, Tom, isn't it? From all sorts of backgrounds.
Oh yeah, the people I've met over the years in racing have been some of the best people I've ever met. The characters, probably one of my favourites, who was actually a member for a little bit, was Tracksuit Dave, who used to hide behind the cameras at the races. I'm sure you're aware, Mike, with Tracksuit Dave, but he was actually part of us for a bit, and he's a character. You know, I've met some great people. Touching on what Sam said about bringing more people into the sport, I think it starts at school. Personally, I don't think schools do enough to promote racing. Very rarely, you might see a few school children having school trips at the track, but that's very, very rare. I think that schools could do a lot more on educating children with horses. And I think that's a great way into the sport. A lot of what I learned when I was younger was through school, and how you learn about life and what different interests you have. And I think we could start there. I think we could definitely push that more. And I think that racing needs to look down that route a lot more. for the ownership experience, as we touched on, I believe that we really need to concentrate on better prize money and better facilities and more badges available. The allocation needs to change. It needs to change now. I'm sure the racecourses can do more than they are. And 6 badges is just not good enough.
Yeah. Well, gents, thank you. I'm sorry there's been communication problems on my side of things, but I've got the gist. What I have enjoyed is chatting to both you, Sam, and you, Tom. It's been great to chat and to hear your enthusiasm. And hopefully the future will give you lots of opportunities in the syndicates that you both run. So go steady out there, and we'll see you on the racecourse very, very soon.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All the best, guys. And thanks very much indeed for watching EPTV. We'll see you again very soon, I hope.